On this Monday night, tracking the chain of COVID-19 infections. Canada's contact tracing app gets ready for download after Alberta's app fell flat.
They have to get it right.
The tough task of finding out where you've been and who you've been around as police bust another overcrowded weekend bash. The Prime Minister on the hot seat. Justin Trudeau prepares to testify this week on the We Charity controversy. Games turfed. The Major League season is barely out of the dugout and already on deck to strike out. Plus, jaw-dropping fine. The close encounter one family calls a dream come true.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. In places where COVID-19 is making a comeback, Canadian health officials blame the bar scene and house parties, where crowds cram indoors, drinking alcohol and ignoring physical distancing, which is why a weekend bash in Brampton, west of Toronto, is sparking a national outcry. Police say they broke up a house party with about 200 guests. Organizers allegedly tried to hide the gathering by setting up barriers and hiring private security to park cars nearby.
You got a bunch of yahoos again that number one, hold the party, and then a whole bunch of 200 yahoos show up to hold the party. Like, guys, what? Like, man, come on. Like, what don't you get? Like, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Now, the man who allegedly threw that party told Global News that he only invited a couple dozen people, but that more showed up after guests posted about the event online. He's now been fined $880 and is also facing bylaw charges with a maximum penalty of $100,000. And in Alberta, public health officials are sounding the alarm after a major spike in cases. 304 more people have now tested positive since Friday, and 8 more have died.
As we see in the case numbers, the curve is no longer flat in Alberta. We all need to assess our own lives for where we are at risk of spreading or contracting the virus.
And case numbers are also rising fast in Saskatchewan. 31 more people tested positive, 22 of whom are from Hutterite communities. Saskatchewan's premier says that in the coming days, public health officials will visit every Hutterite community in the province to offer testing and ensure that public health orders are being followed. And key to getting those community outbreaks under control is contact tracing. And soon there could be an app for that. After weeks of delays, Canada is now testing a new national smartphone app to help with contact tracing. Heather Yourex-West looks at whether the technology deserves a download.
In a crowd of strangers, a single case of COVID-19 can spread like wildfire, and the chains of infection can be difficult to trace.
If a contact tracer calls you on the phone and says, you got a positive test, who were you near? I don't know who I was next to on the TTC. I don't know. I don't know who I was at if I was at a bar and restaurant.
This scenario is exactly what has been facing contact tracers in recent weeks. Outbreaks at bars, restaurants, parties, and gyms have led to a surge in infections. But where a person's memory fails, technology could help. That's the premise behind contact tracing apps.
The way it works is your phone emits a signal over Bluetooth, and it's kind of like a secret key.
Canada is now beta testing an app based on technology developed by Google and Apple. It can run in the background of smartphone devices without draining the battery. A key reason why Alberta's app launched earlier this year appears to be falling short. The app tracks who you come into contact with, not where you've been.
I'm excited about the potential of the notification app. I think we should be really clear that it's not about contact tracing exactly, but rather notifying people who have the app downloaded on their phone if they've been in close contact with someone who eventually becomes diagnosed with COVID-19.
The launch of this app has been delayed in Canada, but experts say that's not necessarily a bad thing.
The one sure way of making not people use it is if there's bugs or it's not user-friendly. So I think it's really important that they take their time to get it right at the very beginning.
Success depends on widespread adoption. An Oxford study found that 60% of people need to use the apps or they don't work. But that concentration doesn't necessarily have to be population-wide.
If you have 60% adoption, but it's 100% among the young population, and the young adults who go out and about are the ones that sort of interact with each other, then that may be beneficial.
It's why, with a growing number of young people heading out to socialize, now might just be the best time for Canada's app to launch. Heather, Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
And infection rates are also climbing around the world. According to the World Health Organization, the number of cases worldwide has roughly doubled in just the last 6 weeks. The United States, Brazil, and India have topped the world's caseloads, but numbers are also rising in places that had previously appeared to have the virus under control, such as Australia, Japan, and Spain. And since the start of the pandemic, more than 16 million cases have been reported to the WHO, and more than 640,000 people have died. Crystal Goomansingh has more on the global picture, including the man known as Asia's sickest patient.
He is rail thin, struggles to breathe and walk. Back in March, while working in Vietnam as a pilot, Stephen Cameron was diagnosed with COVID-19.
And I was under for 10 weeks in life support. It's no laughing matter. It's a very serious thing, and I think people can't be blasé about this.
But it appears people are being careless. Vietnam is forcing 80,000 people to leave the popular resort city of Da Nang because of new cases. Infections are rising rapidly around the world. Australia recorded its highest daily count Monday, despite the fact that nearly 5 million people in the state of Victoria are on lockdown.
We have too many people who have symptoms and they are going to work. And what that means, even with mask wearing, that is an unacceptable risk in terms of transmitting this virus.
Spain is also dealing with a surge in cases, as is Japan, Ukraine, even Belgium. In Brussels, the Prime Minister says the reproduction rate of the virus, the number of people one infected person can spread it to, has been above 1 for several days, leading to a surge in cases. As a result, for the next month, people can only interact with 5 others.
What is clear that pressure on the virus successfully pushes the numbers down, release pressure on the virus, and the numbers can creep back up.
Since January, the World Health Organization has been pleading with people to take the virus seriously, noting that travel bans can't be kept up indefinitely and multiple measures are needed to stop transmission.
So whether we're dealing with second peaks within the first wave or second waves, in some senses is not the right question to ask. The question to ask is, how much pressure do you have on the virus?
I mean, I'm a living example of what this virus can do and how it is serious.
The 42-year-old is hoping by early next year he'll be well enough to fly again. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
President Donald Trump's national security advisor has just tested positive for COVID-19, making him the highest-ranking official in the Trump administration to contract the virus. Robert O'Brien is now in self-isolation and said to be experiencing mild symptoms. O'Brien appeared publicly with Trump in Florida back on July 10th, but it's unclear if they've met face-to-face since then. One of O'Brien's daughters has also tested positive. And new COVID-19 cases continue to surge across the United States. Places that had seen very few cases, such as Hawaii and Montana, are now showing dramatic increases, while Florida and California are now considered the new New Yorks. And in the nation's capital, a quarantine rule goes into effect today as lawmakers debate more economic relief for struggling Americans. Jennifer Johnson reports.
With Florida and California topping New York as the states with the highest number of COVID-19 cases, Vice President Mike Pence traveled to Miami, where testing sites are overwhelmed. Local leaders telling residents to be patient.
By the end of the week, we will have doubled the testing capacity at our county-run sites.
Over 420,000 Floridians have tested positive for the virus, but crowds are gathering on Miami beaches, and many residents are still refusing to wear masks.
They can't tell me I have to wear a mask. I'm not going to wear a mask to make somebody else feel comfortable.
Places like Florida, Hawaii, and Texas are now facing a double whammy. Hurricane season during a pandemic that is already overwhelming hospitals. But the top White House advisor on the coronavirus says she's also concerned about what's happening in several other states.
We do believe that there are states that do need to close their bars. to decrease indoor gatherings to less than 10, to really make it possible to control the pandemic before it gets worse in states like Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, and Virginia.
As President Trump visits a biotech firm working on a vaccine in North Carolina,
America will develop a vaccine very soon, and we will defeat the virus.
The largest clinical trial in the world begins this week. 30,000 Americans have volunteered for it. This is one of 25 potential vaccines in clinical trials across the globe, according to the World Health Organization. But there are no guarantees any of them will work.
There's not going to be a magic bullet, but hopefully a vaccine that gets approved lessens severity of illness and hopefully promotes some degree of herd immunity more broadly.
Washington, D.C. has become the latest to require a 14-day quarantine for people coming from hotspots as leaders desperately try to keep the virus under control. And on Capitol Hill, Republicans have finally unveiled their latest economic stimulus plan. Federal pandemic unemployment benefits for millions of Americans expire Friday. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Well, it's expected to be a big week on Parliament Hill as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is grilled over the We Charity controversy and his government's now cancelled contract to administer a $900 million summer student grant program. The Prime Minister and his Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, will testify before the House of Commons Finance Committee on Thursday. And We's co-founders, brothers Craig and Mark Kilberger, will also have their moment in the spotlight, facing questions on the affair tomorrow. Our Mike Lecouture is following all of those developments for us, and he joins us now from Ottawa. Mike.
Well, Jeff, opposition MPs are gearing up for what could be high political drama over the next few days. Among the questions they want answered, how did the price tag for the student grant program seemingly change?
Today, we're launching the new Canada Student Service Grant.
The original program was supposed to be worth $912 million, but documents presented to members of the Finance Committee and shared with the media show the government was only going to pay $543.5 million to have the We organization run a student volunteer program. And opposition MPs want to know where the rest of the money was going to go.
All the financials just keep changing on us. We can't seem to get a straight answer, which I think is also very concerning.
$500 million was supposed to be earmarked for grants to students who took part in volunteer programs. The remaining $43.5 million would be to administer the program, which had hoped to help up to 100,000 students. Now, We backed out of the agreement July 3rd, citing controversy over the Liberals handing the organization a sole source deal, which includes ties between the charity and both families of Prime Minister Trudeau and Finance Minister Bill Morneau.
And there is evidence for both the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister Morneau that they were acting for a dishonest, corrupt intent, trying to help one of their family's favorite charities.
A part of the contract saw the government already pay $30 million up front to the charity on June 30th. However, We sent out this copy of the agreement with footnotes showing the money has not been drawn upon and funds will be repaid by We in full. The details of repayment are presently being worked out with the government.
Now, also testifying tomorrow is the former chair of We Charity's Canadian Board of Directors. Michelle Douglas confirmed to Global News that she resigned in March, citing concerning developments at the organization. Jeff?
Mike Lecouture in Ottawa. Thanks, Mike. The growing calls to defund the police. Coming up, a new poll reveals how Canadians feel about proposals for an overhaul. Welcome back. It's been exactly 2 months since Regis Korchinski-Paquette fell to her death in Toronto following an interaction with police. Her story, along with the deaths of George Floyd and others, have sparked calls to defund the police. But a new Ipsos poll for Global News shows Canadians are deeply divided on the issue. And as our Mike Drolet discovered, the split is largely along generational lines.
The family of Ejaz Chowdhury was worried when they called 911. The 62-year-old, they say, was schizophrenic and needed medication. They expected an ambulance, but police showed up instead, and Chowdhury was shot and killed.
Clearly, the police just does not look like they've been capable of handling any type of mental health cases. $1 billion for authorities that are meant to protect and serve us, but they're doing the complete opposite.
No justice, no peace.
Abolish the police!
It's cases like Chowdhury's that continue to fuel the movement calling for police forces to have their budgets reallocated, which is better known by the catchphrase, defund the police. What is certain amongst Canadians is they're uncertain on this issue. In an Ipsos poll conducted for Global News, 51% support the idea of defunding police and redirecting money into community services. Where you see the divide is along generational lines. Gen Z and millennials are far more supportive than Gen X and boomers. Even with George Floyd's death in the U.S. and Canadian cases like Chowdhury's fresh in their minds.
I can't believe that those people would hear those things and just refuse to respond or choose to ignore it. I think that perhaps we just aren't reaching them with the tools that we're currently using. And so maybe we just need to be in more places where the news is delivered to them.
Still, she says, compared with where Black Lives Matter was with the issue a year ago, it's progress. The protests did lead to lively public debates. In June, Toronto rejected a 10% cut to its policing budget, and Vancouver said no to a 1% cut. Edmonton, however, agreed to reallocate $11 million over 2 years, but no decision has been made on how it will be spent.
Here's a real opportunity right now, and if all we do is look at the police and we don't look at the underlying societal issues that drive why the police are responding to these kinds of calls, then we're not going to fix anything. It's just going to be more of the same.
And all Ijaz Chowdhury's family wants right now is something good to come from his death. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Still ahead, police reveal disturbing new details about the gunman behind Nova Scotia's worst mass killing.
This is the largest mass shooting in Canada in our lifetimes.
Hundreds gathered in Halifax today, calling for a public inquiry into Nova Scotia's deadliest mass shooting back in April. The protest was sparked by the government's announcement last week that a 3-person panel will review how police responded. But families and friends of the 22 victims say that process lacks the power and transparency to conduct a proper investigation. And we're learning some disturbing new allegations tonight about the man behind that shooting. According to newly unsealed court documents, Gabriel Wortman had allegedly been smuggling drugs and guns from the state of Maine for years. That's according to people interviewed as part of the police investigation. The documents also contain allegations that Wortman had a number of secret hiding spots on his properties. Wortman was shot dead by police in April after killing those 22 people. And lawyers for Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou argued in federal court today for the release of more information relating to her arrest. In a virtual court appearance, her legal team pushed to see details from a set of redacted government documents. Her lawyers want to find out more about the planning and execution of her arrest at Vancouver International Airport in December 2018, including who was involved. They also want to see if there was information about cooperation and evidence sharing between Canadian and U.S. agencies. Her extradition proceedings are expected to continue into 2021. Still ahead, pandemic problems could cause a major league strikeout, even before the season's in full swing.
Look at that, everybody. There's a shark in front of our boat.
Looks like they're going to need a bigger boat. That fin sighting wouldn't excite everyone, but this family in Nova Scotia drove their boat to get a closer look. It's believed to be a great white shark, which would make it the first sighting in that area this year. And some much-needed good news for hockey fans. The NHL says there were no positive cases of COVID-19 last week, as players dust off their skates for the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Teams are arriving in their bubbles in Toronto and Edmonton, getting ready to hit the ice for the first round of the qualifiers starting Saturday. But Major League Baseball is now canceling games after opening the season just last week. Tonight, Mike Armstrong looks at whether the baseball season could crumble before it gets into full swing.
That ball is pulled down the left field line.
Miami Marlins players voted to play this game Sunday night despite knowing 3 players had tested positive for COVID-19. What they didn't know was that Monday morning there would be more. Between players and staff, according to ESPN, they're now up to 14.
Right between the legs.
It's thrown a wrench into everything. The players are stuck in Philadelphia. Game 1 of their next series is postponed. And the team they just played and shared a field with for close to 4 hours Sunday, its series, Phillies-Yankees, is postponed as well.
Rounding third, heading for home is Goslin.
It's fair to say that guys are concerned. We're talking about these guys traveling back to their homes and their families and their kids, and it's the reason we want to be safe.
Now, Major League Baseball brought in rules to try to mitigate transmission. It's banned chewing tobacco and sunflower seeds and supposedly high fives. Well, not if you go by the celebration after this home run.
Nobody happier than Giolito right there. Someone in that Pirates dugout has been tossed.
There were scenes like this one, a manager and umpire putting on masks for an argument, but there are now questions as to whether that's enough to work.
And stay socially distanced.
We're all human beings, and we're playing through some tough times. We have struggles. These guys have families. I have family. We think about that stuff.
Unlike the NHL and NBA, baseball didn't try to come back in any sort of a bubble. Off the field, players were on their own. Some predicted it wouldn't work and questioned the sincerity of the effort.
I don't think they were ever really interested in pushing a season. I think if it worked, then great, and if not, oh well.
No Eagle here with you. Now, even playing and living in a so-called bubble is only as secure as the people in it. The NBA has ordered a Clippers player quarantined for 10 days.
Lou Williams locked in.
Lou Williams was let out of the bubble for a funeral last week, but also went to a strip joint. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is Rice Lake in North Vancouver, BC. We love seeing Your Canada, so please email your photos to viewers at globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Donna Friesa will be back here with you tomorrow. Have a great night.